Okay, so step one, we just need to find out the exact resolution of the ProWalker GPU viewport. So the fastest way to do this is to set the samples to a really low value and then just export a still image. So I come up to the camera, capture an image, choose window size because that's going to use the exact resolution of the ProWalker viewport. Click OK, and I'll just say viewport res. Save that. And it goes really fast because it's only 2 samples. And then if I open that, come into properties, details, we find out that our ProWalker GPU viewport is 1300 by 711. Now the second step is to make the SketchUp viewport match this resolution exactly. And we can do this using a plugin called Enroth Viewport Resizer, which is available on the extension warehouse. And all this plugin does is lets you rescale the SketchUp viewport to an exact pixel value. So go ahead and pause the video, install Enroth Viewport Resizer from the extension warehouse, and then we'll get back to it. Okay, so now that Enroth Viewport Resize is installed, we can use that plugin to match the SketchUp viewport to the resolution that we got from our ProWalker window, which was 1300 by 711. So if I come up to Extensions, Resize Viewport, I can just type in 1300 by 711, and when I hit OK, you'll see the SketchUp viewport's going to spring into a new shape, right? And if I just overlay the ProWalker window, you can see these 2 viewports now match exactly. Wonderful. So now that the viewports match, I can export my lines from SketchUp. So I'm going to minimize ProWalker. In SketchUp, I'll go to File, Export, 2D Graphic, and if I just select Options here, I need to make sure Use View Size is checked, and as you can see, that's 1300 by 711, just like we specified. Make sure Anti-Alias is checked, and then click OK, and I'm just going to rename that Barcelona lines.png. Click Export, and that's going to save that to my disk. Now, if I open these 2 images in Photoshop, we should see that the lines are going to match the render exactly. So I've got my lines and my render. I'm just going to select that and paste it into a layer right over the top. And if I just dial down the opacity here, as you can see, the lines are perfect. And all I would need to do for a final image is set this top layer to multiply, and then fine-tune the opacity until the line weight is how I want it. There is still one final problem though. For one thing, 1300 by 711 is relatively small for a finished image. And the problem is that at lower resolutions, SketchUp's anti-aliasing for 2D exports tends to be pretty bad, so we can see some jaggedness on diagonal lines. The other thing is that we only rendered the ProWalker GPU image with 2 samples, so really I would want to go back and redo that render with, something like a few hundred samples so that the image is clear. And we might also want to scale that up. So what I can do is come into image size, and as long as this aspect ratio stays locked, I can reset the scale to whatever I want it, and it's still going to match the aspect ratio of the 2 viewports. So let's say I just want to render with a width of 2000. That's going to give us 2000 by 1094. I'm going to click cancel, but just remember that number, 2000 by 1094. Come back over to SketchUp, File, Export, 2D Graphic, Options, change that to 2000, and it was actually 94, but I don't think the 1 pixel is going to make much of a difference. So we'll say lines larger, save that. So I'm going to bring ProWalker back to the forefront, and we're just going to export a higher quality still image. So come up to Settings, change the samples from 2 to something like 250, click OK, go to Capture a Still Image. Remember, we want custom, but we want 2000 by 1094. Sorry about the loud laptop fan. Click OK, going to call that Barcelona larger, click save, and then I'm just going to wait until it's finished rendering. So I'll pause the video, and we're back. So that render finished. I'm going to minimize ProWalker and SketchUp, come back into Photoshop, and open these two new versions. So we've got lines larger and Barcelona larger. As you can see, the lines are a lot more crisp and clear than they were in the previous version. I'm going to copy this, paste it on top of the Barcelona render, and if we go into multiply, what's going to happen is the white portions of the image become invisible, so all we can see are the lines, and we have our line overlay. Now, maybe it's a little bit too heavy. I would probably want to tone it down to something like, something like 32 seems pretty good. I just want a subtle accent to sort of emphasize some of the edges, and this does look a lot better than it did in the previous version. But if you wanted a heavier line weight, you could, use that all the way up at 100 or, somewhere in the 60 to 80 range. But I'll leave it down here, zoom back out, and that's it. We have our finished line overlay. Right, so just to recap, the key takeaway is that the SketchUp viewport and the ProWalker viewport need to share the same aspect ratio. So what we did was we created a quick still render to find out the resolution of the ProWalker viewport. Then we use NROth viewport resize to resize the SketchUp viewport to exactly the same value. Then we export the lines, create the final render, and overlay the lines in Photoshop. Of course, you could also do that in Podium Image Editor. I just used Photoshop for the sake of the demonstration. So that's it. I hope you guys learned something. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments of the video or on the Podium forums, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks a lot.